Welcome to the MYD Show. I'm Kirsty Watermeyer. I'm delighted to be welcoming you to the program, Season 4, Episode 2, and in studio with us, absolutely delighted to have Patrick Sam, a Namibian who has done so much for both social activism and both in the arts culture, in the arts arena. Patrick Sam is someone I've known for many years, and what an inspirational man. So delighted to have you come and share your story with us, Patrick.
Thank you, Kirsty. It's been a moment of absolute enthusiasm to be here. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Oh, it's my pleasure. As I said, we've been friends for many years now, so it's really great to be able to be sitting down with you in this space. So let's start at the beginning, Patrick. Tell us about your childhood. What were some of your defining moments?
Well, I think my childhood was very interesting in the fact that I was one of the first black children to go to an all-white school. Right after independence, it was like independence on Saturday. By Wednesday, I was in an all-white school, and the reality was still that I lived in Karatura. And I think the spectrum that you're provided in terms of coming from a place which is highly violent, at the same time of having like extreme community sense and extreme love, and then moving every day into another space that is a lot safer, but has its own challenges. Challenges in terms of the heart of the people.
Yeah, and that disconnect.
And that disconnect. So I think for me, my childhood's defining moment is that the fact that even in Windhoek, I'm one of the only few people that know how to navigate the whole Karatura or the whole town area. So I think people don't cross those barriers. Yeah. And so breaking these things down and emerging into a space where like you're not completely accepted, because if people want to come over to your house, you can't really take them to Karatura in town, at school, but at the same time, you also can't bring the people from Karatura into these spaces. And so there's almost a paradox.
Yeah.
A paradox within breaking barriers, becoming normal. Also people thinking, I remember in Emma, one of my first mistakes coming from a formerly black kindergarten was, teacher, my head is painting. You know, that's one of the things that I said. And they're like, painting. And the people laughed. You know, and I was one of the only black kids. And I remember that day, I needed to grasp how English is navigated. Or how do you then allow yourself into a certain space, and how do you excel in it? So I think my childhood's defining moment is the everyday experience of moving into these spaces that were dual, yes, in a sense, and also both intra and inter. I think that's my childhood defining moment.
And unnecessarily dual, so it's wonderful to have that perspective on either side of the spectrum, to be able to say we don't need to be dual, we can learn from different spaces, we can bring that together. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about today. Today, you're the chairperson of the National Arts Council of Namibia, a broadcast journalist, a poet, and a writer, amongst many other titles of achievement. Who's the man, though? Tell us about who you are today, Patrick.
I think what I am today, because I believe in a certain sense of maturity, or that certain things are just given, and we go through experiences that activate many of these things. And at heart, I've always been an artist. And what is the role of an artist? Because in life, there's many things. Within ourselves, there's many things. And so what do you allow, and how do you consolidate it, and how do you sum it up in a world that post-industrial revolution became very specialized? And it became not about who are you, but about what are you, yes, or what do you do? But my grandmother always said, hey, what you do is not who you are.
Absolutely wise words.
What you do is not who you are. But I mean, what you do is important,
yeah,
but so is who you are.
Who you are.
And so I think, having lived about 35 years now, I know that I'm an artist, because an artist naturally cares about the human condition. Personally, within friendships, within the household, within communities, within the country. And so for me, because my strongest sense is sense, right? So within that, how do you nurture it? How do you manifest it? Requires, to a great extent, connection. And how do you harness connection? And how do you harness significance? All right, so the other things that I am is I'm actually an education specialist as well, with a master's degree in international education policy, looking at how did various countries use education as a tool for human development. Beautiful. Is there a difference between things like schooling and education? So a lot of people go to school, but they don't get educated.
Exactly.
Or you go to school and you get educated. Or, you know, again, that duality exists there as well. So to answer your question, I think my strongest emotion is compassion.
Beautiful.
And I think the compassion was harnessed, again, to your former question of my childhood. Who I am today is really somebody that wants to ensure that the soil within which we are planted, I have a role and responsibility towards that. Watering it, de-weeding it, fertilizing it. But yeah, I think, to keep it simple, I think I'm an artist.
That's really beautiful. It's incredible when you look at your life story and how for so many spaces that you've been taken into, it's been a look at duality and how we can find the synergy in both. It's really beautiful, that golden thread that sort of weaves through your life. I love the advice of your grandmother. I find it so sad when we meet new people, it's the first thing we would ask another person, what is it that you do? Like that's the most important thing that makes you who you are. I mean, your
And
life
if you
is
ask
not
who
your
you
job.
are, then it's an uncomfortable conversation.
Yes, then people get really uncomfortable with, because most times we haven't even thought about that. Who am I beyond my career or my job or the responsibilities that I have in this life? So now let's talk a little bit. You mentioned about who molded and influenced you. Would you say your grandmother was the person that molded and influenced you the most?
Definitely.
Beautiful. So let's talk a little bit now then about, we know Patrick Sam, the man who owns the stage and who's comfortable with a mic in his hand, but tell us about maybe the little bit of the lesser known version, which is, and we're all multifaceted people, so it's wonderful that you've got all this dynamic in your life, but let's talk about the social transformation activist that you are.
Oh, wow. Kirsty, I've been very privileged, so I have to rewrite the narrative. I sometimes feel like I have to do things that have never been done before, because we want things that we've never had before, right? So that's really my strong pillar in understanding that if I want something that I've never had, and I always say, if we want things that we've never had, we have to do things that we've never done. And I kind of feel like naturally I became the guinea pig, At a time, like in grade 12, I got to go and finish high school in the United States with kids from 80 different countries. And where I came from, and also the narrative is that boys from Damaralokasi don't go there.
Yeah.
Right? So we're breaking barriers. And then we have to connect.
Exactly.
And there's that theme that runs through it, where it's there, and then moving to the Netherlands to do my undergraduate, but in these spaces and the places and the people you meet, it connects you in a way that you can't retell things that have always been told.
Yeah.
Right? So I understand that I will have to do things for the first time to almost normalize it for people, to make it look like it's doable.
Yeah.
All right? So I've come to accept that. Like, I've never had the most conventional things, starting from like an 18th birthday party. I never finished matric here. I never had a matric farewell. I never had a 21st. The things that are just like a given for a young person growing up in Namibia. And I never understood why. It is because innately we're all gifted.
Yep.
And the activation of the gifts are different.
Yes.
So what soil are you in that triggers certain things about you?
Exactly. Oh my goodness, I agree 100%. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. We're going to take a very short break, so do stay with us. We've got so much more exciting stories to discuss with Patrick Sam. Welcome back to the MYD Show in our series on love and knowledge, and joined in studio by Patrick Sam. So Patrick, you were sharing just a moment before the break such fascinating and such important information about how our different gifts are activated dependent on the different soil that we're in. But it's funny how in life when things happen to us, we see it as like that victim, it's happening to me instead of it's happening for me. And we look at our soil and we say it's not fair. But actually without that soil, we wouldn't have those things activated inside of us. Tell us a little bit about how you got to that space where you could see it as a benefit to your journey versus something that was a hindrance. I mean, not having a matric farewell.
Well, getting back, to my childhood that we spoke about earlier on, and the duality, one of the things that I was fascinated with is I had to go study, why do people do what they do? Right, so I've really been a behavioralist in going in and uncovering and redressing and addressing and imagining. And looking at also things that are unknowns like magic, and how that transcends within us. And getting back to the social transformation part, I realized one of the most critical things that we have to confront is this question: what is your value?
Absolutely.
And when you ask people that, again, it's an uncomfortable space to be in, right? And so you break it down obviously to many variables. But I think there's key elements around value, especially in a very contemporary context. So one of the things that I always look at is knowledge. how much knowledge do you have? What can we do with what you know?
Yeah.
All right? Do you have a skill? Do you have an attitude? Do you have a behavior? Do you have necessary resources to kind of understand this idea of value? So a lot of people juxtapose nature and nurture, but nurture is a natural process.
Exactly.
So you are birthed in a natural sense, and then you get nurtured throughout life, and you have to really look at how do you harness a lot of the knowledge you have? How do you shape the skills? How do you adapt the required attitudes? How are you behaving accordingly to things like manifesting yourself or your dreams?
Yeah.
So if we start there, that helps. But here's the conundrum. Here's the catch-22, is that we are an element. So if you're looking at, for instance, other elements like water, wind, earth, fire, right? And it's kind of the Captain Planet analogy that we had. I mean, Captain Planet would be so relevant these days. But what I like about when looking at humans as an element is the fact that water can quench or drown.
Yes.
Fire can burn or warm.
Yes.
The wind can blow you over in storms and all kinds of things, or create erosion, or cool you, or create a breeze.
Yeah.
And the same thing of an element I look at humans, which is like the fifth element of Captain Planet, heart. Right? So we have a certain heart that we have to bring when we are alive.
Yeah.
And in that heart, it's also an element, which means that there's also duality there, which means that we can create or destroy.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. What beautifully wise words. And 100% agree with you, because it's our superpower, our heart, our love, our ability to love. But by the same token, unless we're in alignment with our own heart and the good that it can be giving, we're going to use it for damage. And damage is created through being disconnected from your heart.
And I think a lot of people struggle with this internalization because you're not supposed to be many things.
Yeah.
Right? You have to be that one thing. So you have to fit into that box. And you have to push yourself into the corner. And you have to pamper yourself up. And you have to almost trick yourself.
Yeah. And there's a lot of unhappy people that are tricking themselves because of that. And it's because they said so in society. And who is society if not us?
Yeah. So, recently I wrote a piece that I really want to share just the first part of it. It says, I omitted my presence from these spaces because the love I received was too much to be contained by my heart.
Oh, wow.
It superseded the love I had for myself, so naturally the vase overflowed. The contents was filled with baggage from the past, no room for things that I adapted newly. I was caught up, pinned down, filled to the brim. I was committed to assisting the system that destroys the self. Now, that's the duality I'm talking about.
I love that. Can I just take a moment and say that was so beautiful? I absolutely love that. Oh, my goodness. Thank you for sharing.
So there's a lot of acknowledgements that we have to make about ourselves. And I think my biggest acknowledgement, especially experiencing childhood trauma, was how do you rebirth?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you allow yourself to reconnect with yourself as a person, and then how can you spread that?
Exactly. And heal in the process.
Yes, because I think there's a lot of information, knowledge out there that people aren't in the right soil, so it becomes difficult, right? And when you can make those concessions of the elements and the duality of, I was committed to assisting a system that destroys the self.
Yeah.
And I was complicit in that.
Yes, exactly.
Both me and the environment and the people that I chose into my life, or the places that I've been.
And we forget that we actually have so much power in the spaces, because it will take the same amount of energy, of our own energy, to commit to a system or an environment or a space or even a thought pattern of our own as it would take for the next thought pattern or system or space. And we forget that we have a choice, that we can choose to commit to something that is going to be beneficial to us, or we can choose to commit to something that is going to take away from us or tear us apart.
Yes, and I think those are what I call high stakes decisions.
Yeah.
You gotta. I had. It's interesting. I've only had one black professor in my life, coming from school in the formal schooling, and it was during my masters at Columbia, and it was in African American literacies, and it looked at why was it that for the large part of history, black people are subjugated.
Yeah.
Especially in the American context, and what did science say about it at the time? It was because of their ability to read and write. So literacy was at the core of subjugation. So what science said is you're subhuman because you have an inability to read and write. And then when slaves like Phyllis Wheatley from Senegal went there and they were reading and writing to the king, they said, Thomas, no. They might be able to read or write, but they can't be original in thought. Right? They can only mimic.
Yeah.
And I think this has become like a collective consciousness, even on the African continent, in terms of what have we internalized about ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely.
What have we told ourselves? And again, I have lived a life where I had to break a lot of barriers down and provide access, even as the chairman of the Art Council now, being a young man, being very deeply connected to artists, understanding the condition of the art, understanding that art brings the beauty in our life.
Yes.
You know, the clothes we wear.
Yeah. Everything that
the
we use was
music,
designed.
everything that we
The
love.
spoons that
Everything
we use,
that we
everything.
love.
And even things we don't love, it was designed.
It was art.
Yeah.
It's art.
Yeah.
And I think when you earlier asked me about social transformation, that's what I want to be part of looking and going forth from now.
It's so beautiful.
How does art, which is a natural aesthetic, right, especially in a traumatized society,
Yeah.
all right, how do we use art for the healing?
Absolutely beautiful. I love it, Patrick. And it's so important. It's so important that you're positioned in the space that you're in right now, because this narrative that you spoke about, I think it's a global problem that we have, and we become our own worst enemies. We stand in our own way because of ideas and thoughts that were so unfounded and such nonsense, but that we have inculcated into ourselves and into our lives to continue to allow to make us feel less than. And nobody has the right to make you feel less than. You don't even have the right to make yourself feel less than. And there is no such thing as less than and better than. We're all humans. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses, and we're just people. And the fact that we would contain or keep that idea, hold on to it, we're disadvantaging ourselves, and it's just not good enough. So you are so perfectly positioned.
So what we have to do
right
is
now.
we have to redress the past.
Yes.
We have to address the present,
In
and
the
we
present.
have to progress in the future. And a lot of the times that sometimes means shedding. And it's not an easy process, but easy, difficult. In Afrikaans, I always say, what is.
Yeah.
You know, so if that is what's required for transformation, we need to provide it the right impetus to transform.
Yeah. And be willing to address it and tear it apart in the now. Because I think a lot of the things we get scared of transformation and then we don't talk about, or maybe not scared of transformation, we get scared about talking about these things and then we don't get to transformation. If we don't tear it apart and be willing to just sit with it, even if it's uncomfortable right now, we won't transform it.
And that's what's interesting to me. So I have a triple baseline, Christy.
Okay.
There's three things I fundamentally believe in. Everybody, I could pitch to anybody, that I'm convinced if we don't focus on these three things, it's going to undermine humanity.
Okay, what are those three? Pitch to us.
The three things are people.
Yes.
One, we have to invest in people. The second thing is the planet.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to invest in the planet. And lastly, it's prosperity.
Yeah.
And I mean, this year, there's in the government speech, there's the idea of a shared prosperity. But there's a dissonance that people go through. You know, so it's like, oh my God, I love art. I love the music that we have. I love the clothes that I wear. I just want to encourage my kids to do that.
Yes, exactly.
You know, I love the idea of shared prosperity. Living in Namibia where I have access to all kinds of places. I'm just not willing to give up my land.
Yeah, exactly.
Or share it.
Or we're never going to get there unless we actually start making those difficult decisions, those sacrifices now that actually lead to everybody's greater good. It seems like a sacrifice, but it's actually a benefit. Even though you're giving up something now, you're gaining everything.
Yes. So I think there needs to be more spaces and more places, and this is why I really love your program, because it gives an opportunity to provide something that could be unknown, or known unknown to many people out there. So it is there taking us into places and spaces and conversations and, you know, talking about things like masculinity. And yesterday somebody asked the guy around me, do you have a fragile masculinity? And in my head I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because now masculinity has also become fragile.
Yeah.
You know, where it was seen as something that didn't have the possibility of being fragile. It didn't have the aspects of vulnerability. It didn't have the power of that. So in order to allow ourselves in Namibia and to transform, I really fundamentally believe that the arts is the only way.
Absolutely.
So we have to bring into our house, I understand this is a nation that needs to deal with the aesthetics of life. What's beautiful.
Yeah.
Because of where we come from. So we need to encourage more people to do it.
So we can
need
get
to go
that
more encouraged
healing.
to go into the spaces. We need more people to go out there and consume our art and bring it into our households.
And be fed by it.
Yes, and be fed by it. And at the end of the day, we really have a choice, like we spoke about earlier. We have a choice to create, or we have a choice to destroy. But art makes you create. Now, even in an economic sense, what that means is as an artist, you have an intellectual property. The future of the world's economies are based in things that don't exist today.
Exactly.
It's in innovation.
Exactly.
And promoting the arts makes you at a macro level relevant as a country, as a state, to be able to access things like a global market, which will then change the livelihoods of our people. I think the biggest threat to Namibia is poverty.
Yeah, absolutely. But how do we get out of it? We've got to start with innovation. We've got to start being at the forefront of other things.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I love that.
Give people agency. And art does that. And a lot of the times, from an economic perspective, we have like this idea that we need to extract, pull away from Mother Africa, from the earth. I'm like, we can do that, but we can also have other avenues and opportunities because we have a demographic dividend on this continent where about half the populations in most African states are younger than the age of 25.
Yeah.
Now, that's an opportunity or a threat.
Yes, exactly. It's how you see it.
And I think the creative economy might be our answer.
I think so too. It reminds me, we're going to take a short break in a moment, but it also just reminds me of a show that we did on MYD where it was shared with us that there's more gold sitting in landmines, right now, in landfills, rubbish dumps basically, than is in the ground at the moment. So if we don't start getting innovative, and if we're just taking out of the earth, we're missing all these wonderful opportunities on the other side to really create for the change we want. We can take a tiny break. Do stay with us. We'll be right back with more from Patrick Sam after this. Welcome back to the MYD Show. I'm Kirsty Watermeyer, and we're sitting down with Patrick Sam. Patrick, it's been so insightful having you in studio. I've absolutely loved it. But I've got just a few more questions before we wrap up. The one is, what do you think of the statement, community collaboration is the only true way to create for change?
Kirsty, seeds only grow in soil. So as much as we can talk about, I'm a good seed, I'm a bad seed, you're an okay seed, the fact is seeds only grow in soil. So a good seed doesn't grow in bad soil.
Yeah.
But a bad seed grows in good soil. So when I think of community, I think of the soil. And it's not like the seeds aren't important, they're secondary. And I think that's a humility that's required in people to realize that the planet, people, and prosperity are ideals that are bigger than us.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much.
And so that's where the humility comes in, that we're not primarily the determining factor for our own well-being. So that's why self-help also is weird sometimes. Because you over-focus on yourself,
Yeah.
but a lot of our strength comes from things that might be outside of us.
Yes, exactly.
The moon,
Yeah.
the mountains.
And our influences, the people in our community, people who are around us who have molded us.
So I think as a criteria of how do we move forward, all right? Like we spoke about innovation, I think there's 5 key areas that are very important in terms of this. And it's obviously been researched on, and it requires people to be socially driven. Because when your soil is good, and even if you're a bad seed, you grow.
Yeah.
So we need to become more socially driven. We also need to be growth focused. And in growth, I just don't mean in terms of money or profits. The economy is really about resources, all right?
Yeah.
And what does growth really mean in our country where something like poverty, inequality, and unemployment are high? What is your personal responsibility towards addressing that? So we need to be growth focused in providing opportunities, access, and mobility for people. And then we need to be innovative, like we spoke about largely. Resourceful is important. Are we doing the best of what we have?
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to talk about what we don't have. But have we optimized what we already have? And that allows for being resourceful. And I think largely it's also about being accountable.
It's been so wonderful having you in studio, Patrick. I want to ask you one more question before we wrap up. And it's your message to Namibia, but specifically looking at our theme at the moment, love and knowledge.
You know, as a behavioralist and somebody who's dealt with it and is manifested on the various platforms, I've learned just 2 things. That everybody desires connection and everybody desires significance. And significance is acknowledgement. All right? Acknowledge that that person exists. Acknowledge that that narrative can be told. Acknowledge that there's multiplicity and multiculturalism. All right? So I think what my message is that we need to almost decolonize a lot of the things that we've been taught about our consciousness and what we think and feel. All right? A lot of people have become so detached to what they feel, but it's like the mind, the thought. And I'm like, how did the mind create a hegemony? How did that happen? If your senses are the things that make you have these transidual experiences, how did you give hegemony to one sense? Yeah. Right? So to end off, I want to finish with the last part of the poem I was reading earlier. It says, when the clock ticks, I rise. When the clock ticks, I rise. When the clock ticks, I rise at an altitude that defies normal societies. Normal being the past peace, being the present connection, being the future. I stare in your eyes, anticipating to see streetlights, a shine so bright that even though there are apparent whispers of darkness, the light connects us. When I breathe your breath in, you exhale mine. When I breathe your breath in, you exhale mine. When I breathe your breath in, you exhale mine. I read from myself. The walls have been broken, the bridges have been built. I read from my soul, and this poem is in the name of progress.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Thank you, Patrick. I love it. It gave me goosebumps. It is just exquisite. And thank you so much for coming to share with us and inspire us with your wisdom. It's been wonderful having you on this show.
Thank you, Kirsty.
And thank you for joining us. It's been wonderful being in your company once again. Do stay tuned because we're going to be back with more very soon. But until we meet again, from me, Kirsty Watermeyer, remember that it begins and it ends with love because love is what you are.